everyone, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another Opus Dei deep dive video. Or if it's your first time here, hi, my name is Rebecca. Over the last almost year now, I have been doing deep dive research into the religious organization / cult Opus Dei. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, please consider subscribing, and you can go and find all past videos. I will link them, and they're also compiled into a playlist over on my channel. Today I thought that we would do something a little bit different. I thought that we would take a step back from the really heavy researchy videos that I have been doing, which, by the way, I have no intention of discontinuing. There is still so much information to go over, but I really think that this is overdue in a big way. As you should know if you've been here from the beginning, I began doing this entire deep dive series because I felt that there was a need to shine a light on the experiences of the victims of Opus Dei. I felt that there was something here that was not being addressed. I felt that there were people that had been taken advantage of and kind of shoved to the outskirts of society and told that their experiences didn't matter. I felt that that was wrong, and I felt that it needed to be addressed. And that was my whole purpose for initially beginning this series, and that is still true to this day. And so today I wanted to do something that I've never done before, but is probably well overdue. I want to do the first Opus Dei mailbag. Over time, I have gotten so many messages and emails from so many of you, and from the bottom of my heart, I have to thank you for that. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Those messages keep me going. They keep me on track. They keep me focused. They remind me of how real this is. It's not some crazy conspiracy theory. There are real people with real experiences who have been impacted horribly by the things that they have experienced through Opus Dei, and I cannot thank you enough for trusting me enough to share those experiences with me. That means more than I can put into words. And so I have 3 letters today from 3 separate individuals who have had experiences with Opus Dei, and I think they do a very good job of showcasing the scope and impact that Opus Dei can have across so many people's lives. These individuals have requested to remain anonymous, and of course I will always respect that. I have no desire to re-victimize anyone, and I understand how difficult it is for people to come forward and talk about the things that they have experienced. So to these 3 individuals in advance, thank you so much. My hope is that by sharing these stories, we can all be reminded of the individuals involved in the situation and how real their experiences are and how much their voices do matter. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into it. This first letter is from somebody that I'm just going to be calling Jay. He says, "Thank you for your interest. I apologize for the wall of text. Feel free to not read it if it's more than you're looking for." Let me just interrupt and say very quickly, don't ever apologize for sending me a wealth of information, a wall of text, as Jay puts it. Don't ever apologize for that. That can only help me in the long run. I want that information. I want to hear your experiences. I want to know about what it is that you've been through. I value that. I'm really grateful for your video series. This email is more just kind of my life with Opus Dei. If it sparks any specific questions, I can go deeper into anything you'd like. I believe it was in the 60s that my grandfather first joined Opus Dei. He was a prominent attorney in a major US city. Earliest memories are more like emotional impressions, I suppose, but for context, I was an extremely sensitive child who would tend to take things very literally and very seriously. So being exposed to ideas that are encapsulated in quotes like these, quote, "Just as bacteria are cultivated in a laboratory, so you are cultivating those thoughts and those errors with your lack of humility, with your lack of prayer, with your failure to fulfill your duty, with your lack of self-knowledge. Those tiny germs then spread everywhere. You need to make a good examination of conscience every day. It will lead you to make definite resolutions to improve because it will have made you really sorry for your shortcomings, omissions, and sins." End quote. That is from The Forge 481. And quote, "Take a look at the way you behave. You will see that you are full of faults that harm you and perhaps also those around you. Remember, my child, that microbes can be no less a menace than wild beasts." End quote. These quotes were certainly not the right approach for a kid with my personality and inbuilt sense of duty. I took much of what was said very literally. My relationship with Opus Dei definitely contributed to textbook scrupulosity, which is a form of religious OCD. My mother is a schizophrenic with a religious obsession, so the certainty that is provided by Opus Dei dovetailed strongly with her diagnosis. In my early youth, I had the impression that my mom was basically some kind of Joan of Arc type character, and Opus Dei et al. Were the good guys, and fundamentally anything that threatened any of her schizotypal subpersonalities were the bad guys. There was a sense of being totally outside the culture that I was living in. Interestingly, I find myself having a lot in common with third culture kids, people who are born in other countries and then emigrate and keep the dual citizenship. They often feel on the outside looking in. You could imagine it is hard to tease apart what could be attributed to her religious obsession and what could be attributed to how Opus Dei interacted with that obsession. The positives: an interesting social network when you're in it. I went on many trips / camps and attended tons of study groups / evenings of recollection, etc. I also benefited from friendships with older men, but those same friendships then disintegrated when I disassociated with Opus Dei. They provided friendship for my father, yet at the same time, those very friendships end up being the only ones available to him for all the usual Opus Dei reasons. I think he would have had a much wider circle of friends if Opus Dei wasn't a part of his life. I'm one of 7 kids, and the configuration is something like this. My sister and I were born close to each other, then a 6-year age gap. Then my parents reconnected with Opus Dei, and bam, 5 more kids in a span of approximately 8 years. While I wouldn't trade any of my younger siblings for the world, Opus Dei was absolutely the reason my parents had more kids. Yet despite the insane financial and psychological strain that this incurred on the family, one working parent who didn't make much money, to my knowledge, the organization did not help with that in any practical monetary way. My grandpa and grandma also had 13 children, in no small part because of Opus Dei. I have been on a long journey and have struggled with my own emotional difficulties, and while it wouldn't be fair to put that entirely on Opus Dei, I am certain that if it were never in my life, I would be a radically different person. I've dealt with long periods of depression and unemployment. I can't separate that from my mom's religious obsessed schizophrenia, which I can't separate from Opus Dei. Once I separated from Opus Dei, I had to spend a long time, approximately 20 years, reconstituting my identity. I'm still working on it. I'm probably the best described as a non-theist, although that's not perfectly accurate. Still, I have developed an appreciation for Christian symbolism, which in a way makes Opus Dei that much worse in my view. Their rules-based, extremely literal, extremely conservative interpretation of Catholicism, at least as their members experience it, is definitely missing out on much of the deep value of Catholicism and Christian storytelling. I think their pretensions of being a saint in ordinary life is covering for laundering social elites' guilt and cognitive dissonance that occurs when they try to square their identity as highly placed members of society with Jesus' perspective on humility and so forth. One way to pass through the eye of the needle, so to speak, is to no longer be rich because you gave money to Opus Dei. And another way to justify elitism is to act as if you have access to special knowledge. This way you don't have to confront how incredibly lucky you are, you can just call it grace. The people I met in Opus Dei in Milwaukee and Chicago and New York were not ordinary in any way. They were obviously targeted for their sophistication and cognitive gifts and agreeable personality traits. I think they keep more ordinary people like my dad, who is quite bright but not a social elite, around in part because he was literally grandfathered in, and in part to keep up the impression that it's normal people involved. It is a cult, and the strain it has put on my family, especially as my brothers and sisters are now grown up and at odds with my parents because of it, is incalculable. While most of the numeraries I encountered in it were fine, even now I can see that many of them were deeply closeted people in a lot of pain. Most of the supernumeraries and cooperators were kind people. They are fundamentally being duped because Opus Dei offers a shallow solution to the meaning crisis that has taken hold in the West and is now spreading elsewhere. It falls short, and the amount of time I've had to invest in moving on from it has done incalculable damage to my mental health, employability, and by extension, my relationships. Jay closes out his letter by requesting to be kept anonymous and telling me that I can use any of this letter for my work, just so long as I keep some of the details vague, since his family is somewhat well known in Opus Dei circles. I thought that letter was really interesting because it gives the perspective of somebody who has grown up inside Opus Dei from essentially the very beginning, who has a long family history with Opus Dei and has seen the toll that being involved with the organization has taken over time. I think that's something that cannot be overstated enough. This next email is from somebody named B, and we actually had a decent amount of correspondence because he brought up several points in his initial letter that really piqued my curiosity, and I asked him to go into it a little bit more in depth. So we will read his first email first. He says, "Hi, thank you for your Opus Dei videos and for responding to my comment. I've not had the opportunity to watch all of your Opus Dei content, but it largely mirrors my observations. I do apologize for contributing after you wrapped up your Opus Dei series, but there's more information on how Opus Dei operates that I wanted to go into." He sent this to me right after I put out that kind of wrapping everything up video when I had to take a step back for school and everything. He didn't realize that I wasn't done. "A couple months ago, I stepped away from seminary after 2 years in preparation for the priesthood. Among my biggest frustrations were the ways that Opus Dei operates within Catholic seminaries. Nearly all seminaries have priests and seminarians with Opus Dei ties. It is problematic for multiple reasons. First, Opus Dei is constantly targeting seminarians. Seminarians are not allowed to hold jobs and are entirely dependent on financial support from friends, their home parish, or their diocese. Opus Dei has substantial amounts of money and makes it difficult for seminarians to avoid accepting financial gifts from them, which they then use to gain leverage over seminarians. I never accepted money from them, but found their unwanted overtures difficult to avoid. I do know of several seminarians who received large gifts from them, and in the same weekend, 2 guys in the seminary who were very pro-Opus Dei received cars that appeared to be worth roughly $10,000 apiece as gifts, complete with insurance coverage. They were the only 2 seminarians who ever received cars as gifts, as most gifts that are given directly to seminarians are less obvious. Cash, checks, gift cards, that sort of thing. Second, every semester, Opus Dei sponsored a chastity retreat for seminarians that was conducted in a way that was very sketchy. We would be put into vans and make a 3-day, 2-night retreat at a retreat house in the mountains over a couple of miles of winding dirt roads far from the nearest town. These retreats were the only ones in which seminarians were not allowed to use personal vehicles, and in each retreat the only 2 topics that were ever discussed were pornography and male homosexuality. While it was supposed to be a private retreat house with my background in IT, I could not help but notice tiny hidden cameras in every room except for the bathrooms and a hidden satellite dish. A scan of the Wi-Fi network showed over 200 interconnected smart devices. For a remote retreat house that contained little of value to be stolen, the entire property was unusually well monitored and well connected. Additionally, while we were told that the retreat house was off the grid, a look at the electric metering system revealed that the property was actually run on grid-tied solar. Why Opus Dei outright lied about that was a mystery. When the retreats concluded, books written by Opus Dei members were given and individual thank you notes were expected, and the address to which they were supposed to be sent was over 100 miles away from the location of the retreat house. As you have noted, Opus Dei is an ultra-conservative group, and their goal in working with seminarians is essentially to bribe seminarians as future priests to adhere to the good Catholics or conservatives ideology. They know that seminarians have a lot of influence, whether they go on to be priests or they discern out, as I did. For them, it is about expanding their power and influence. Third, Opus Dei is constantly targeting priests to get them to push their conservative narratives and giving them financial incentives and a platform that amplifies their message. I am fairly certain that Opus Dei was the force behind the wide dissemination of and sizable financial gifts to Father Altman for his recent "You Can't Be Catholic and a Democrat" homily. Fourth, Opus Dei was very active in promoting conservative philosophical and theological viewpoints within the seminary environment as being the only orthodox ideas. Priests and lay faculty with Opus Dei ties refused to entertain a free and open conversation of ideas on a variety of subjects. Open discussion on topics such as LGBTQ+ issues, voting, American politics, or anything touching on culture war issues within the United States just did not happen. Dissent with their views is also silenced, and throughout my time in seminary, I kept my asexual identity closeted. Anyway, the point is that Opus Dei knows that money talks, and they use this money to peddle conservative influence in the present and future influencers within the Catholic Church and the United States, and they wield their influence in strange and bizarre ways. Avoiding them and their influences is difficult. So after that initial email, I had some questions that I asked him to clarify, and he was kind enough to respond. In his follow-up email, he had this to say: "Thank you for your response. Feel free to use my information anonymously in future videos. Seminarians occupy an unusual place in the life of the Catholic Church, and that they are highly regarded, deeply admired, and sometimes even envied, but are left so vulnerable that they are easily preyed upon or taken advantage of. McCarrick showed areas of vulnerability in seminaries if a sexual predator enters the henhouse, but the vulnerabilities that McCarrick preyed on are non-sexual. Seminaries are set up and run in ways that create vulnerabilities that range all over the map. Financial and reputational vulnerabilities and exploitations of the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience are the ones I am most concerned with. Opus Dei looks for and exploits these vulnerabilities to make it possible for agendas to be pushed and for large gifts to be given. My belief is that large gifts were given for blackmail purposes to force the loyalties of seminarians and eventually priests. Of all of the various Catholic groups I met, and I met a lot of different groups of course, Opus Dei was clearly by far the most problematic. I fully agree that they are turning Catholicism, which I love deeply, into a religious cult. Frankly, I have no idea what the purpose of the surveillance system or of the grid tie system, where I know I effectively caught them in a lie, at the retreat house was for. I was not informed of the existence of the surveillance system, and I doubt that the seminary was informed of its existence either, as nobody in the seminary ever said a word about it. If they used it to survey us, which I have no idea if they did or not, its use would almost certainly have been illegal. I noticed it only because, as someone who had gotten a bachelor's in CS and IT, I had a background to observe and notice its existence. Whenever I interacted with Opus Dei members, who frequently would seek out seminarians, I came away with the impression that their culture effectively was a Catholic KGB. The best way I found to deal with this was to avoid them as much as possible. In the future, I am thinking about launching my own platform to advocate for seminarians. I do not know what that will look like, but I feel called to do something about it. Seminarians are incredibly vulnerable, and while some former seminarians thrive, I have seen several fellow seminarians become very disillusioned and struggle to move forward in life after seminary. The church has many young men who, as I did, discerned a call to the life of service to the church, excelled in every conceivable relative physical, intellectual, and psychological screening, but then got exploited in some way by a problematic environment that fails to respect their interests. For every man ordained, anywhere from 3 to 10 men leave or discern out, depending on the diocese, religious order, or seminary. The problem is not a shortage of willing men, but a shortage of a properly nurturing and safe environment. Anyway, thank you so much for everything you are doing. I look forward to working with you in the future whenever I get started with this project, as these two issues are deeply intertwined. Best, B. There are a couple of things about this letter that really stood out to me. The first and the most significant is that, being raised Catholic as I was, there was always a huge focus on the fact that there was not enough men who were answering the call to the priesthood. For whatever reason, that was just the narrative that was pushed, the fact that there were just not enough men, and the idea was that we just needed to create ways to essentially recruit more men. And I say we, I mean the Catholic Church, needed to find more ways to attract men to the priesthood. This email goes in direct opposition of that narrative. B is saying that there are plenty of men who want to answer that call to the priesthood, but because of the environment in which they are placed, many of them, most of them, don't make it. And that is horribly tragic. It has been my experience that Catholic priests are not properly prepared for the task that is assigned them, which is huge. You're responsible for a group or even multiple groups of people's spiritual welfare. And in my personal experience, from what I have seen, these priests are not prepared to do that. And that can have disastrous consequences, not only for them, but for their church community and for the individuals who are negatively impacted by these priests who are not equipped to deal with whatever it is that they are supposed to be dealing with. That really stood out to me. I really hope, B, if you're watching this, that you find a way to help seminarians to do something. You are in the perfect position to do so. And if there's ever anything that I can do to help you with that, just let me know. I would love to collaborate on something, because even though you and I have very different perspectives of the Catholic Church, I still recognize the very positive role that religion can play in people's lives. If you have the desire and the drive to do something like that and to make a positive change, that definitely deserves support. So that is the first thing. The second thing was the bit about the surveillance. That was just so creepy on so many different levels. But what's really interesting about that is that I am just now finishing up Maria del Carmen Tapia's book, Inside Opus Dei, which is a fascinating read. And if you're interested in Opus Dei at all, I highly recommend it, because she gives such a broad, nuanced perspective of Opus Dei. She was in the organization for many, many years, from practically its inception up till its establishment as a major organization, and she knew Jose Maria Escriva personally, so fascinating read. But when Escriva was living in Rome, and the Opus Dei Center that is still there, he had surveillance equipment set up throughout various parts of the Opus Dei Center that was all connected to his suite, so that he could monitor and listen to people's conversations in various rooms and corridors and so on and so forth. That is something that Escriva himself did it's not insane to me or completely out of question to think that Opus Dei is still continuing to employ that, especially given the links that we know they will go to keep tabs on and collect information about its members to use at a later date for some sort of blackmail or just to keep them under control or whatever the case may be. That really stood out to me. I think that's significant. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's surprising, but it's definitely creepy. Now, this last letter is perhaps the most disturbing. And the reason for that is because the individual who reached out to me is underage. And the things that they are telling me about are just incredibly upsetting. The toll that would take on somebody's mental health and physical well-being later on, you will see. But let's go ahead and read this. This person requested to remain anonymous, but they didn't give me a name, so we'll just be calling them G. They said, "Dear Rebecca, I am a 17-year-old and an 11-year student from an Opus Dei school and have been affected because of my contact with this organization. I joined the school in 2011 at the age of 7, and not being Catholic, I was to pray to Opus Dei more than God, which was something that even my parents didn't even notice. As a young child, we were given a lot of homework so that the only free time we had was in school, where we were being reformed. 1 or 2 years later, they began brainwashing my parents with how they should not give us phones and that they should delete my social media accounts. By the age of 11, my so-called tutor, who had my parents separate a lot of my non-Catholic friends, which at the time I was not aware of but later found out about, realized that they were trying to change me. My tutor encouraged me to spy on my classmates, which made me uncomfortable. I began to realize that we were being trained to be submissive, and that if anyone did not do as instructed, they were given a detention, an hour after school where we were given punishments like standing with our heavy bags for that 1 hour. We were encouraged to fast as an offering to God, even though we were under the age limit for fasting. Some of my classmates began to have eating disorders, and our teachers didn't even look worried. But why would they be? Some of them were Opus Dei numeraries. By age 15, we as students were forced to go for Mass thrice. And I don't know if she meant by this thrice as in 3 times a week or 3 times a day, but I noticed that a lot of the mental health of my classmates was deteriorating due to the workload and the brainwashing we received. I also noticed that only Catholic students were enrolled and maybe a few non-Catholic and Muslims who were told not to wear the hijabs even during their religious holidays. My parents, still under the school's brainwashing, enrolled me in high school. That was where it got worse. We had a compulsory lesson of religious education where they taught about the Catholic ethos under the Opus Dei version. Any objection during the lesson by a non-Catholic was reprimanded immediately. In high school, we were forced to be more involved in the Opus Dei traditions like retreats, which at times made me uncomfortable. We were not allowed to join drama festivals like other schools, and school activities which we did attend were kept under a tight leash, where we weren't allowed to interact with students from other schools, and we had acquired the name Barbies. If only they knew our struggles, they would leave us alone. A parent came forward about how her daughter was not admitted because she was a single parent, and our principal signaled that children of single parents are too broken to be fixed. We were also instructed not to talk to any press about it and not to post about it in our social media accounts. There are several instances where I found my classmates crying because of the workload and the sleep deprivation it had given them. Our teachers watched us like hawks, which felt like an invasion of my privacy. We were on several instances verbally insulted for the oddest reasons, like having a second piercing, being told that they were from the devil. Later on, when my classmates expressed their own problems with the institution, we concluded that the problem was with the institution and not with us. I will be finishing my academic year in 2022 and finally leaving this place. So there's a lot in here. The first thing that I want to talk about is Opus Dei schools. Not really something that I've gone into a whole lot yet. At some point it will probably become more relevant, but Opus Dei will either fund or directly run a educational institution. In fact, I just saw a news headline from the UK, and if I can go back and find it, I'll post it up here, but I don't know if I'll be able to, about how a mysterious, well-funded organization bought this school in the UK that was going defunct, basically. And if you read through the entire article, it became very clear that the mysterious organization was obviously Opus Dei. This is something that they do, and I believe that they do it for many reasons. These schools tend to be very prestigious. They tend to attract a certain type and class of person, and it's essentially a recruiting ground. If you can get them while they're young, raise them up in Opus Dei, you have a fresh ever-renewing crop of people for the organization. It's pretty sick if you think about it. A lot of the time, parents, I think, unwittingly get involved in it, not realizing what it is that they're getting their children into. This is something that I actually talked about quite a while ago in my video about Opus Dei violating its members' human rights, which I'll link if you haven't seen it yet. But it's definitely a trend that I have noticed many, many times, and everything that this girl told me is the same thing that I've heard mirrored from other people. The extreme workload that is put on these people, whether we're talking about numeraries in Opus Dei centers or students in these schools, the insane expectations, the very subtle pressure to do things like spy on each other and blackmail each other, the eating disorders, that is something that I have heard quite a bit, enough that it makes me very, very uncomfortable. It gives me quite a bit of concern. All things that I have heard before. And the fact that this is somebody who is underage, who has been in this for so long, I shudder to think of the toll that this is going to take on them throughout the rest of their life as they move on and try to get space from this thing. The one thing that I will say that I think is a positive and a silver lining is that she has managed to recognize what it is that she is involved in far quicker than some people who are involved in Opus Dei for decades. She has woken up and realized that she's not the only one who is experiencing this, that the issue is not her, it's with the institution. And not only that, but it's her and several, if not the entirety of her class, which can only be a good thing. The biggest issue with people coming forward, I think, with Opus Dei, or even acknowledging that what they went through was wrong, is the fact that Opus Dei places people in a very isolated environment. You are in an organization with tons of people, but you are isolated. And any issue or problem that you have is a sign of bad spirit, and it's always your fault, and you're the only one who's having the experience. This is something that we've talked about many, many times, and it's classic cult behavior. So she knows. She woke up. She sees what she's going through. That gives me hope. G, if you're watching this, I hope that you get out. I hope that you get distance, and I hope that you realize that none of what has happened to you, none of the things that you've been exposed to are your fault. It's a result of this organization and its decisions, not anything to do with you and not anything to do with your parents. Your parents have been just as brainwashed as everybody else, and I have no doubt that they are probably very good people who just wanted a solid education for you, and this school was probably their best option. That is it for the Opus Dei mailbag for today. I thought that these emails did a really good job of just showcasing Opus Dei and the impact that they have on so many different people and so many different walks of life from all over the world. It's a global issue, to be sure. Again, I have to say thank you for everyone who has reached out to me. If you would like to reach out to me and share your experience, you can find my email down in the description for this video, and I think it's also on the About section of my channel, so feel free. I will protect your anonymity if you desire. Just know that you're not alone, and if this video doesn't prove that to you, I honestly don't know what will. And then one final thing that I want to share, and this is just something that I've been thinking about a lot with this whole experience. It can at times feel like I am fighting a losing battle. Like there is absolutely nothing that I can accomplish by doing this. I am going up against an organization with literal billions of dollars at their disposal and very powerful people in their ranks. What can I, with my tiny little channel and an iPhone camera, hope to accomplish? But then I think about a story that I heard one time. There was a man that was walking on a beach after some type of weather event, and thousands of starfish had been thrown up on this beach and couldn't get back to the water. And as he was walking along, he came upon a little boy who would every now and again bend down, pick up a starfish, and throw it back into the water. And the man came up to the boy and he basically told him, look, it's nice that you're doing this, but there's so many starfish, you're not going to have an impact and this isn't going to make a difference. Why don't you just go play? And the boy considered what the man said, and then he bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it back in the water. And then he looked at the man and he said, it made a difference to that one. I feel both like the little boy and like the man, wherein I feel like I cannot possibly make a difference because the task is so huge. But yet, if I can reach just one person, if somebody sees this and realizes that they're not alone, if they can avoid interacting with Opus Dei at all, if they're being courted by somebody who is trying to recruit them and they realize what it is that they're trying to be drug into before it happens, if I can just do that for one person and make a difference for that one individual, it will have all been worth it. All of this will have been worth it, and my efforts will not be in vain. Something that I've been thinking about a lot, and so that is why these letters, your comments, your messages, they mean so much beyond words. Anyway, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, reach out, whatever. I'm always here. My inbox is always open. Thank you for being here, and I hope that I will see you for the next video whenever and wherever that may be. Bye.